Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode review of the Book of Boba Fett. Today, we are taking a look at episode 7, In the Name of Honor. And yes, that's right. I actually called it the Book of Boba Fett this week because I feel like this episode was more or less an episode of the Book of Boba Fett and not an episode of the Mandalorian till the end. But, we'll get there. So, this is the season finale of the Book of Boba Fett. And I think this is the end of season 1, not 2. Not the end of the series. I think we are getting a season 2, because they've called it the finale, the season finale, whatever, what have you. But then, like the same day or like 24 hours later, in a very very short time span, they announced when the Obi-Wan Kenobi show is going to start airing, and that's going to be in May. So we don't have that long to wait, which is nice. But with that, they were very deliberate in saying limited series. Yeah, a new limited series starting in May. Book of Boba Fett, they've never called it a limited series. They've never called it a one-off, or it's always been a spin-off of The Mandalorian. So I'm kind of under the impression that we may get a season 2. I don't think we're going to get one next year right away, but I still think one is definitely in the cards. I think there's enough left open that, depending on how much Boba appears in The Mandalorian, I think he will appear more in The Mandalorian. I think it's definitely possible that we get a second season. I think it'll maybe be a little while. Mando may wrap up first. They may have their season 3 and 4, however long it goes, and then circle back to Boba. But I think it's likely that we may get a season 2, or a prequel, a season 0 or something. Because I'm just going to jump all around here, because with all of the dialogue between Bane and Boba, it was obviously very reliant on those unfinished episodes of Clone Wars, where Cad Bane is training young Boba Fett to become Boba Fett. And it's like, because what did Boba say? He's like, "I'm not a little boy anymore," or something like that. So there's that history between them. They know who each other are. So I mean, obviously they had some familiarity with each other because of season 4, where Bane hires him to cause a distraction in prison, and then Boba breaks out with Bosk. But there's obviously more than that based on their interactions. So I feel like it's safe to say that the unfinished episodes of Clone Wars are definitely canon. We kind of had that inkling anyway because of Bane's little headplate thing that he had in Bad Batch, and now here too, when his hat came off. So I'm kind of wondering, are we going to get those episodes? Maybe cut together into a movie or something and call it Star Wars: The Trials of Boba Fett. Just take those animated episodes, finish them up. Because they were already partially done anyway. So, and they were all recorded and everything. So and Star Wars animation is popular. So it's already in progress. It's different from starting something completely from scratch. So I would totally be on board with getting those episodes in a movie format or what have you, limited, in a prequel 4-episode run to Book of Boba Fett or something like that. Whatever form it takes, I'm game. I'm totally down to get those episodes, and I have been for a long, long time. But now especially, because I feel like they almost have to, or they have to explore that in another avenue at some other point in time, because the Cad Bane Boba showdown is like a very niche thing in the Star Wars community. You really only know about it if you're like up on everything and you know all the behind the scenes info on Clone Wars, and you've watched celebration panels and stuff, and that's a lot of people. But there's even more people still that that it's like, ooh, who's this new guy coming in? When Bane showed up at the end of the last episode, and it's like, this character's been around for over a decade. He's not new at all. So I feel like you can't do the "I'm not a little boy anymore. Here's my final lesson, Boba. Always look out for yourself. Anything else gets you killed." I feel like you can't have that dialogue in there and be so specific to their relationship and then never elaborate on that. So I kind of feel like that we're going to eventually get those episodes maybe cut into a movie or something. I know, because I feel like that, at least from what we know of those episodes, that they are kind of separate enough from the main Clone Wars story, and it is Boba and Bane's story, that you could release that totally separate from Bad Batch or Clone Wars and have it just kind of be its own thing, but it shares an art style with those two before mentioned shows. So I feel like that could work. I feel like that could definitely be a thing. Like Star Wars: The Trials of Boba Fett, new animated movie coming to Disney Plus spring 2023 or something. I don't know. So I'm kind of thinking maybe maybe this is part of the reason they brought Bane in to kind of gauge interest to see if people would be interested in getting those episodes. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Overall thoughts on the episode. Really liked it. It was good. It was kind of like pure action, and that's okay. Lot of fun moments. Just seeing Boba and Din absolutely clean house, coming out on their jetpacks and just mowing people down left and right. And yeah, they were taking hits, but the armor was protecting them. And then and then the reinforcements arrived and everything. It was just really, really good action sequences. And this episode was actually directed by Robert Rodriguez. So, and I will say that the action in this episode was far better compared. It was much more on par with his episode of The Mandalorian that he directed in season 2 than the 2 other episodes he directed in the Book of Boba Fett. So I wonder if like all of his priorities was in this episode, and then the action for the other 2 episodes, he's like, oh yeah, I've got an action sequence here. Okay, I'll do my best, but my heart's not really in it because I'm focusing on this Rancor choreography with the giant droidicas. So because I don't think that the problems we had with his action scenes from the first and third episode were present in this. It's flowed pretty well. It seemed fast paced. It didn't seem like it was going slow or anything. So yeah, I guess he just didn't put as much time or effort into those episodes because he was like focused on this one or something. But if you're not a fan of his directing style, then there were still the hallmarks of that in this episode, because one of the mods, I can't remember these characters' names. One of the mods, he does that little totally not necessary spin around to crouch trick onto his knee to fire his blaster when they're getting chased by Pikes and they're helping Black Chrysanthemum back up. That was totally unnecessary, but it's a total Robert Rodriguez thing to do, I feel like. So I saw that, I'm like, oof, people are not going to be happy about that. And I was correct. People were not happy about that. It's to me, it's the same thing about the colorful Vespa speeders. It's like, okay, it's a little silly, but I like it when Star Wars can get a little silly, and this isn't awful. It's like, I don't care for these modern, street use characters, like I've said previously, but I don't hate them. It's like, okay, they're whatever. I could take them or leave them, but it's not. I don't find them like horrendously offensive like some people seem to do. It's like, these are the worst characters ever. They must die immediately. And it's like, what is it that they kind of have a cyberpunk thing going on or something? It's like, because I just don't understand why people take such great offense to them. I mean, yeah, they're not the most in-depth or well-written characters, but it's also not their show. So they're just side characters. They're pawns to be moved around on the chessboard. So yeah, that's why there's not a lot of time devoted to them. So it's like, okay, yeah, but that's kind of why I can take them or leave them. They're in it so little that I don't feel like their presence irritates me like it does some other people. I don't understand why, for some other people, they're just like totally against the idea of them. And I don't really understand it, because it can't be the fact that they are modifying themselves with droid parts and being cyborgs. Because if people start going, there aren't any cyborgs in Star Wars, this is ludicrous, I don't like this isn't my Star Wars, I'm like, people, Darth freaking Vader, General Grievous, Luke, he's missing a hand, depending on what movie you're watching. And it's a robot hand, so it's like cyborgs have been in Star Wars since day one because of Vader. So if it's the fact that these modders are cyborgs is the problem, and you don't think that's very Star Warsy, I got bad news for you. So that's really the only thing I can think of. That was like the big glaring, this is the problem with these characters, because otherwise they're in it so little. I'm like, I don't understand why people are upset with these people. Anyway, so moving on from that, yeah, I really just don't have a whole lot to say about this episode in general. I mean, it was good. It was solid. I mean, it dealt well enough with Boba as a character. The conclusion was satisfying for the most part. It wasn't like the end of Mando season 2 where you sit back and take a breath and it's like, man, was that a season finale? This was just like, let's have some fun. And you know what? I had fun. But even then, it did have some really great moments. But it's funny, some of those really great moments were more attributed to the Mandalorian and Grogu. And it's like, oh, well, this is an episode of The Mandalorian now for this 2 minutes where they're getting chased by one of the death droids. And we're having Mando and Grogu reunite. So, I mean, yeah, so it was definitely better than the last 2 episodes and feeling more like Boba Fett show, but it's still kind of, at moments, it was still kind of, oh, now it's an episode of The Mandalorian again. So I just, again, like I said last week, I just feel like maybe this should have just been Mando season 3, and it just has the subtitle, The Book of Boba Fett. And it's like, okay, Boba's going to be the main focus for most of the season, but we will eventually wrap back around to the main plot line. I feel like if they did that, no one would be complaining much. I mean, there'd still be. I mean, well, no, again, because I think some of the things that people complain about definitely would go by the wayside. Because, like, the Tuskens, so I will admit I was wrong. The Tuskens did kind of get fridged because they didn't come back. I still think that it's possible they may show up again in the future. Because, again, like I said, we didn't see the body of the Lady Tusken or the kid. So, totally possible that they're still out there somewhere and Boba just hasn't run into them. But, excuse me. But for the most part, in the terms of this season, yeah, the inevitable, of course, they get wiped off the face of the map, and surprise, surprise, it was the Pykes that did the entire time. I think everyone called that from, like, moment 1. And then, that scene, having the final product now and the season overall, yeah, that part of it was rushed a little bit. We could have definitely gotten more of that for sure. And yeah, again, they had 7 episodes to do everything, and 2 of those weren't really focused on Boba at all. So for the time that they had, I think it was handled well. But at the same time, it's like, well, 2 of these episodes could have not focused on the Mandalorian and been dedicated to Boba. We could have had more time for some of this. But if this is a season of The Mandalorian and not the Book of Boba Fett, then it's like, okay, you know what, that was handled pretty well for the amount of time they had to focus on it. So I mean, it's one of those things. My opinion varies on it depending on the lens that I'm looking through it. If this was a Boba Fett show, then it's like, yeah, that was rushed. That could have been done better. But if this was a season of Mandalorian, it's like, you know what, they did pretty well for the time allotted for that plot line. So it's really, I'm always going to kind of be wishy-washy on this show because of that. And so I really think that even looking at it as Boba's own show, it was kind of disappointing that he kind of got thrown to the side for 2 episodes and everything, and that's always going to be weird. But for what it is, this was still an enjoyable show. And again, like I said earlier, I really hope this means that we're going to get a season 2 out of it because I want more Boba Fett. I want more Temuera Morrison. He's just so fun in the role. I really like him. He does bring a lot of character to Boba. And between this and Clone Wars, I do feel like that we do have an idea of who this character is, and it's an interesting character that's not just stand in a corner and then get tossed into the Sarlacc pit and not really do much, and like he did in the original trilogy, which part of the mystique and mystery of him is what made Boba popular in the first place. But that mystique and mystery was so built up over the years between the release of Empire and Jedi, and then I'm going to just say all the way up until 2002 when Attack of the Clones came out and it's revealed that Boba was a clone of Jango. That whole mystery of who is Boba Fett just kind of got away, maybe got a little out of hand because everyone had their own idea. And I don't think this problem is necessarily even, not to get into this territory, but I don't even think this is a problem that's solely a Boba Fett problem. I think this is also a Luke Skywalker problem, and it's because Star Wars was so big for a certain amount of time, and then after Return of the Jedi came out, there was very scant little of it. There was like droids and Ewoks, and then the EU started in the early 90s, but there wasn't like any major Star Wars stuff for a long time. It was like little bits here and there. So stuff like who is Boba Fett and what is Luke Skywalker like as a Jedi Knight, running around saving the galaxy and creating his own Jedi Order and stuff like that. So that all that stuff just got so carried away that people's expectations and personal beliefs of what those characters are like ends up clashing with canon. So when people go, oh, this isn't Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, it's because of their preconceived notions of what they thought for 20 years or what have you. So, same with Boba Fett. So, I kind of came to this conclusion yesterday that I'm not going to make a blanket statement and say that everyone thinks this, but I do think that there is a majority, and I'm not even going to say majority. I think there is a lot of people out there that their complaints about The Last Jedi, their complaints about Book of Boba Fett is that, these characters they're being written out of character. This isn't Boba Fett. This isn't Luke Skywalker. I think what some of those people want is just endless hallway scenes. Because think about it, because that's one of the things that I feel like goes over a lot of these people's heads that don't like The Last Jedi. Now, I mean, there's various reasons not to like The Last Jedi. But from the very specific Luke Skywalker angle of it, that they don't agree with the choices made for Luke because they think it's out of character. Luke in that movie says, "What do you think I'm going to do? I'm just going to waltz out there with my laser sword and take on the entire First Order all by myself?" And then, of course, later he does, but he doesn't really because he's a force projection. He's not actually physically there, so it doesn't really count. He's able to live up to his own legend while also being what a Jedi should probably do, where they're the keepers. As Mace Windu says in Attack the Clones, we're keepers of the peace, not soldiers. But the Jedi do act as soldiers a lot more often than they probably should if that's their mantra of their keepers of the peace. So Luke, at the end of The Last Jedi, was really quite cleverly able to toe that line of defending the innocent while also stopping evil and not harming anyone because he's a force projection, except himself because it ended up killing him. But I feel like that's just lost on a lot of people. Of Luke is a human being. Yes, he has the Force, but that doesn't make him all powerful. I feel like if some of these people were actually in Star Wars, they'd end up being dark side cultists or something, because they think that the Force is just this all-powerful thing. Yes, the Force does give you power, but you have to treat it with respect, or else you end up like a Vader or a Palpatine, and because then that's one of the things that leads you to the dark side. And even then, even if you're following the light side, sometimes your good intentions aren't good enough, and you do become too dogmatic, and you become the Jedi Order, and and you're like, oh, we should get rid of attachment and blah, blah, blah. And then you can't see the forest for the trees. And oh, hey, now the Empire's risen out of the ashes of the Republic and we've been wiped out. So there is this, I mean, and that's one of the annoying things that I think is annoying about Rise of Skywalker is that Last Jedi really does present this idea of the Jedi of old need to change. Maybe there shouldn't be any Jedi anymore as we knew them, but the mission statement of what they stood for is still something that's worth striving for. And so Rey probably needs to go forth and create a new brand of Force user. And it's like, that was one of the things that I was like, okay, that's a cool idea of people speculating online before the movie came out is that Rey was going to create a new order and call them the Skywalkers in honor of Luke. And it's like, this is the ideal of us to live up to, but we can't be so dogmatic and rigid as the Jedi of old, or else we're going to get wiped out because we're not really going to be in tune with the Force. Because it's like, that was the whole problem with the Jedi Order during the final days of the Old Republic, is that, I mean, there's a whole scene, and I'm pretty sure it's Attack the Clones where Mace Windu and Yoda are like, yeah, we're not really in tune to the Force anymore, so we can't really tell what's going on, and that's a problem. So we should probably not inform the Senate of this because they would probably panic. But then what does the Last Jedi end up doing? It's like, nope, the Jedi were right all along. There was nothing wrong with the Jedi. It's such a tragedy it's still a tragedy they got wiped out. But it's like, it's their own fault they got wiped out because they let Darth Sidious rise. And so the Rise of Skywalker just totally ignores. I'm getting off on a tangent about the sequel trilogy now. But so winding back to my original point here, is that when people go Boba Fett's not in character, it's like, well, not really, because everything that the character has done in canon, leading up to this moment and this traumatic experience of getting thrown into the Sarlacc and then eventually finding a family and then losing it, it changes him. And I mean, I think that's why we kept flashing back to Kamino, is that Boba has just always been very, very lonely. There was a very brief time when he was a child where after the death of his father, he's taken in by Aurra Sing and Bossk and Cassius before he ends up getting shot in the face. Yeah, he was kind of maybe going, oh, I've got my people. And then what happens is Aurra Sing abandons him on Florum when Plo Koon and Ahsoka show up. And there's this, it's really sad looking at Boba's story as a whole. It's because Boba Fett has a really sad story. And it's really, and that's one of the reasons why despite its problems, I like the Book of Boba Fett, is that it's like, yeah, Boba has this sad story because everyone he ever gets close to, he ends up losing. And so he's just kind of been this sad, lonely bounty hunter going around blasting people left and right just because it's like his only outlet for his rage or whatever. But it's such a sad moment where Aurra just nopes out of the bar on Florum and runs off, and Ahsoka gives chase. And Plo Koon's like, hey, can you please tell me where these prisoners are? We kind of need to know so that way the Bossk doesn't execute them. And Boba's like heartbroken. He just goes, she left me. It's like, poor Boba. It's like, poor little boy Boba. And so then fast forward to later, he gets thrown into the Sarlacc. He manages to crawl his way out. And then the Tuskens take him in. And he's like, you know what? I finally found a place where I am accepted, not just because I'm like the best bounty hunter in the galaxy, more or less that I'm kind of my own, I can be my own person here. I am kind of reborn after coming out of the Sarlacc, and I can kind of be who I want and not really kind of live in the shadow of my father and try to live up to his legacy or whatever. And then, of course, he loses them too. So again, while that scene and that plot was all kind of rushed a little bit, it's still a really good storyline which is one of the reasons why it's odd. So unfortunate that it was rushed a little bit, and 2 episodes of Boba's show were taken away from him, because that's actually really compelling for this character. And so, no, he's not being written out of character. He's just not in line with what your personal thoughts on what the character should be based on years and years of speculation because there was no one set. Because I saw this thing the other day where people were complaining about the Republic Commando books by Karen Traviss. I'm like, wait, people are complaining about the Republic Commando books by Karen Traviss? Are you kidding me? They're amazing. And it's like, and some of the things they were brought up, like, okay, now I can kind of see that maybe they're in terms of the narrative and certain characters. Like, okay, you know what? Thinking about that those are some maybe legitimate criticisms. But then, but then another reason that I saw someone lobby against the books is that it doesn't feel like it's in tune with the rest of the expanded universe. And some characters that appear in other expanded universe material feel like they're written out of character. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, are you kidding me? The expanded universe is this giant mess of, I hesitate even to call it a continuity in some degree, because it's like here's the problem with the expanded universe. And while there was a lot of good stuff lost, and that was unfortunate, it's the best stuff of the EU has been slowly trickling back into canon, like Thrawn, like expanded character on Boba Fett and everything. The EU was such a mess, and everyone was just kind of doing whatever the heck they wanted, that there are 3 separate stories of how the rebels get a hold of the Death Star plans. And then to kind of explain that away, I can't remember what did it, but there was something came out, and it's like, well, the Death Star plans were so huge that they had to be kept in 3 separate installations, and so then these 3 separate rebel groups just happened to steal 3 separate plans over time, and that's how the rebels ended up getting a hold of the Death Star plans. Because Battlefront 2 told that story. The original Battlefront 2 from 2005, they told that story there. That they beamed the plans off the station during that prison riot level. Then, of course, I think that's funny. I'm just now making this connection. I think all of these stories are video games. Then, of course, there's Dark Forces, if I'm remembering the name correct. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was, hey, here, let's get the hold of the Death Star plans. And then there was Lethal Alliance, which was a PSP DS game from like 2006. And so all 3, so it's kind of funny to think that all 3 of these stories involved getting the Death Star plans. If I'm remembering things correctly, I think I am, but I may not be. So it's like, if your continuity is so screwy that you can tell the same exact story. Well, I'm not the same story with basically the same premise with the same end goal of getting the Death Star plans. If you could do that 3 times and no one really notices until later, and someone finally goes, "Oh, we should probably do something about this," and go, it was the file was so large, it was 3 separate things. Then yeah, there's not really much continuity going on there. Because there was no direction. It was all these authors basically. It's like, all right, write us a Star Wars thing. So it's like, you get a Star Wars book. You get a Star Wars book. Everyone gets a Star Wars book. And so that's where you get stuff like the Yuuzhan Vong, which is really just, the concept is interesting of this alien force coming in from outside the galaxy and threatening everyone. They're not affected by the Force because they're from outside that's a weird restriction that I don't really like and agree with. So I feel like that the Grisk in canon in the Thrawn novels, that's maybe a little better idea because it has that same otherworldly, very alien threat that the Chiss are looking at that a galaxy at large, going, man, these people in their little rebellions and Clone Wars and squabbles, there's something else we should be worrying about instead of fighting amongst ourselves. And that helps give Canon Thrawn a lot of depth and layers that he didn't necessarily have in the EU, IMO, in my opinion. So it's like, I don't know if nowadays holding up the EU as a whole is necessarily a great idea. Obviously, there was a lot of good stuff in it. I like a lot of stuff in the old expanded universe and Legends. And I think that a lot of people at Lucasfilm obviously do too, because the best stuff from there is getting transferred into canon. It's like, okay, we're going to take the core concept here and we're going to make it canon in one shape, way or another. There's some changes here and there that's not exactly the same, but they're trying to make it fit and actually form a cohesive narrative across all media. That being said, Yoda's lightsaber. Freetown. Dave. So yeah, I didn't bring this up last episode because last week because I kind of got caught up in the whole Luke and Ahsoka thing at the end, and so I didn't even get into Yoda's lightsaber and it's like, oh, we call it Freetown now and everything. I'm like, oh boy, we're back to this again. I'm sure there's an explanation for all of this that makes sense, but I will admit, I was one of those people going, oh, it's Yoda's lightsaber. Wait, Yoda's lightsaber? That thing was destroyed in a comic. But that's an easily explainable thing where Yoda had a second one, or the one that was destroyed was a facsimile that Palpatine had created, because maybe he wanted to keep Yoda's real lightsaber as a trophy. I mean, there's an easy explanation around that. And then the whole continuing divide of Cobb Vanth from the books and then in canon, or excuse me, because the aftermath of canon too, from Cobb Vanth from the Aftermath trilogy and Cobb Vanth from the Mandalorian / Boba Fett and Freetown and everything, that being different, I could definitely see it, since it's not part of the main narrative of Aftermath, that some of the side stories that we get that do pop up, like like the story of Freetown and Cobb Vanth and some of that stuff, that maybe that's not necessarily strictly 100% canon. Those are like local legends and retellings and stuff being told after the fact. And so, like, years later, during the age of the New Republic, people on Tatooine talk about, they see, I guess, cybernetic Cobb Vanth walking down the street, and they're like, oh, what happened to him? And then someone concocts this story about him finding the armor and chasing off the mining guild, and them having a hut to raise and stuff like that. And it's like, none of that's necessarily, the core concept is true, but some of the finer details are not, because it's a story someone's telling. So I could definitely see that kind of being their workaround for some of that stuff. It's annoying, I'll admit, because that's the whole point that was kind of the whole point of getting rid of the EU to begin with, is that there's too much. There's a lot of stuff that contradicts itself. So going forward, we're going to make sure it's all one continuity, and that way we don't get some of these things messed up. And then here we are with, like, oh, Ahsoka now has blue lightsabers, but her novelization that came out before season 7 of Clone Wars still said they were green. Well, that's not really that. Oh, well, here's Yoda's lightsaber. Oh, well, that was destroyed in the comics. Like, oh, Cobb Vanth. Not exactly in Freetown, not exactly the way they were in the books. They're leaving out some details here. So, we're getting some little bumpy territory here with continuity. But I mean, no one's perfect. I mean, Lucasfilm is this giant machine that's pumping out content left and right. I kind of feel like it's understandable that some of this stuff falls through the cracks, and that's another thing, is like, if Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka and all this stuff is leading where it seems to be leading, where this is all stuff that's going to be setting up the sequel trilogy, then I totally have faith in the Lucasfilm storytelling team, the people that are like the keepers of the main story, and like Dave and Pablo Hidalgo and Leland Shee and I feel bad for forgetting her name. She's a producer on like all this stuff. I feel awful for forgetting her name, but there's a team. It's a team of a lot of people that keep all that keep are employed to keep the story straight. Shoot, man, that's really gonna bother me. Anyway, if they can figure out a way to make the sequel trilogy make sense, and they kind of have to some degree, and maybe they probably will eventually, then I feel like I'm confident that they can explain away Freetown and Yoda's lightsaber popping up and stuff. So yeah, and that's another thing that I'm kind of been annoyed about in the last week or so, is the whole Luke's Jedi Temple. It's like, because there are some people out there that are just, look, I get it. I don't particularly, I enjoy them fine, but they're like bottom of the barrel Star Wars for me. I don't really particularly care for the sequels either. But you gotta be realistic, people. There are some people out there that legitimately think that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are in the midst of this great recanonization thing, and Mandalorian and all of the stuff that they're working on is undoing the sequel trilogy. And that, like, Ahsoka show is going to be the final nail in the coffin of the sequel trilogy, and they're going to go, we're on a different timeline, baby, because we're going to use the world between worlds to do time travel and to kill Ben Solo when he's a baby, like baby Hitler, so that way the First Order never happens. Nah. And so, like, are you people serious? You don't spend hundreds of millions of dollars making a trilogy, albeit poorly, I'll admit, but you don't spend that amount of money to make a trilogy and then just immediately go, a couple years down the line, go, yeah, that could have been better, we're going to ignore this. The EU is kind of a different story because George never really considered it to be canon to begin with. He took inspiration from it from time to time, but he never really considered the EU in general to be canon because it was other people telling the stories and he wasn't in charge of it. So that's kind of a nebulous gray area where I feel like they have a right to throw out the EU after the Disney acquisition and everything. And again, the EU was a mess anyway, as I went into a few minutes ago. But these great big movies that cost a lot of money to make, earned a lot of money at the box office. Maybe some people complain about them online, but you, as a company, you can't just go, okay, we're just gonna ignore these. They just never existed. We're just gonna completely, very rarely do stories like this just up and ignore something that came out because they agree that it was bad or something like that. They may sometimes poke fun and go, yeah, that didn't turn out so great. Like the X-Men films that Fox was working on. You know, they sort of kind of did that with Days of Future Past, but that was kind of more or less we're doing this so we can keep making more films, not because we thought the previous ones were bad. And even then, the previous films still exist in one timeline. It's just that at a certain point, then the timeline splits, and now you've got two X-Men timelines. And not that any, well, actually, I was about to say not that any of that matters anymore because of the Disney buyout, and now and so that's not going to matter. The X-Men are going to get rebooted, which is true. They are going to get rebooted, but thanks to Spider-Man: No Way Home, and Loki and WandaVision and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and stuff, the whole Marvel multiverse is open. So I guess all those X-Men films are canon, and can still have happened. Because if the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield films happened out there in an alternate reality, in an alternate timeline, then hey, why not have the X-Men stuff exist at the same time? So might as well, right? So but that's like one of the few examples I can think of, and even then, it's not exactly the same because it's like, I mean, people don't like X-Men 3, and it's not a particularly good movie, and people don't like X-Men Origins Wolverine all that much either. But I mean, that wasn't the purpose for changing the timeline. It was so they could keep making new movies with the newer cast. And well, look how that turned out. But anyway, so it's like they're not going to remove the sequel trilogy from canon. People that think that are, I think, the same people that believe it when Kathleen Kennedy gets fired every 6 weeks from Lucasfilm. And oh, it's totally for real this time. And it's like, I feel like people have been saying that since like 2016, that Kathleen Kennedy is going to get is getting fired or in the midst of getting fired from Lucasfilm or something like that. I feel like people have been saying that for like 5 years or something like that, and it's never true, and yet people still believe it. It's like, if I guess I just want to hope for some strange reason. I've really gotten off topic here, but I promise this is all going to come back to the to the point I'm trying to make about Boba Fett. But I mean, I guess some people just want to hope, which is weird because it's like, I mean, okay, so these 3 movies weren't particularly to your liking. Boo hoo! There is literally hundreds of hours worth of other Star Wars content for you to potentially enjoy that is coming out in the same time frame. It's like, I guess that's kind of my stance on it, is that, yeah, I don't particularly care for the sequel trilogy, but I don't think it ruins the franchise, because it's like, even if you don't agree with where, because like Palpatine coming back is kind of kooky, and I'm like, and episode 7 is just a copycat of episode 4, and it's not really that original, but it could have been good with some tweaks, and then Last Jedi isn't perfect either, but at least it was trying something. And then Rise of Skywalker, I don't think anyone's really happy with at this point, except like the most casual of casual Star Wars fans that like watch the movies and that's it. They don't even watch like Mandalorian and stuff like that. So it's like, I don't particularly care for them either, but I don't let it ruin my enjoyment of the franchise at large, because it's like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. These 3 movies weren't that great. Okay, I'm going to go over here with all this other stuff I like. And it's like, oh, look at all this new stuff that's coming out that could potentially be good. Even Book of Boba Fett, which I was like kind of a meh thing. It's like for base enjoyment level, it's like, yeah, this was still good. I still liked it. It was a fun time, and it wasn't a total, and it didn't have that obvious behind the scenes clash feel to it, where one episode said one thing and then the next episode directly contradicted it. like with 8 and 9, where it's like, Rey, you're a nobody. Yes, I know, I've always known. Rey, you're a Palpatine. I've always known. It's like, you can't have it both ways, people. So anyway, so yeah, I feel like some of these people that are like, Luke Skywalker's out of character, and Boba Fett's out of character. You know, it's like, I can't wait for Kathleen Kennedy to get fired and for them to retcon the sequel trilogy. I feel like these people maybe sometimes just want endless hallway scenes, to get back to my point. Because they have these preconceived notions of who these characters are because of, as I was saying, about the whole time gap of there was limited Star Wars content coming out, so imaginations ran wild. And so, like, EU Luke was super powerful, but even his characterization was kind of wonky and all over the place at times. But people want this super powerful Luke Skywalker, and they also want this super ruthless, cold-hearted Boba Fett, because that's sort of maybe the way he was in the original trilogy. And I totally see it I don't necessarily agree with Luke, because it's like, I mean, there's so much to that character that I don't know. And the way you guys see him is this uber powerful, going around facing down the entire First Order with a lightsaber and killing everyone. I don't know if that's necessarily I don't necessarily agree if that's what Luke Skywalker is, and I don't see where you guys are getting that from. But with Boba Fett, I totally see this guy's a cold-blooded killer. He's a stone cold, bounty hunter that, he actually managed to sass Darth Vader, and he kind of talked back to Darth Vader a little bit and actually got away with it. So it's like, man, what kind of respect does Vader have for Boba Fett if he can kind of talk back to Vader and get away with it? And then of course the armor is cool. I mean Boba Fett spawned an entire fictional culture just based on how cool his armor is. So I can totally see people getting that idea stuck in their head of who Boba Fett is. And at that point in his life, I think that is who Boba Fett was. He was exactly that. He was, a stone cold, emotionless bounty hunter going around, chewing bubblegum and kicking butt, but he's all out of bubblegum. I think at that point in his life, that was him. But that's the thing with characters, though, is it gets boring if they remain static. And an entire show filled with Boba Fett just running around and just murdering people left and right, I don't know if that's necessarily good television, interesting television. I think this was a much more interesting story. Now, I can maybe get some of the complaints that he didn't seem tough enough, because like the first episode he got taken down pretty easy, and he needed to get taken to the Bacta tank. But it's like, well, he was still healing from his Sarlacc injuries and stuff. So yeah, so I can kind of see that maybe he was too weak, but I don't know. I just feel like him wanting to find a group of people to call his own, and to care about the citizens of Tatooine, and make sure that the planet doesn't see the level of lawlessness that it had in the past, that he saw firsthand what a lot of that led to. It almost got him killed because he fell in the Sarlacc because of it and everything. I feel like that's a much more interesting take for a character like Boba Fett, and it's more interesting to see him change and grow as a character than it would be to see him just running around shooting people left and right, and just just taking bounties or whatever. And I think that's why bringing Cad Bane was like brilliant, because not only did it finally kind of fulfill that we see these characters facing off on screen that all of us Clone Wars nerds know about, because Dave Filoni talked about how this is stuff that we didn't get finished. But also, Cad Bane kind of represents what Boba Fett could have been, where Bane's old. They have that quip about how Bane says you've gone soft in your old age, which is funny coming from Bane because Bane's way older. And then Boba says we all do. And he says later, it's like, I'm not a little boy anymore, and you're an old man. Bane's response, of course, is, but I'm still faster than you, and it's true, he was still faster on the draw. But I feel like Bane is kind of the antithesis to Boba, where they're both bounty hunters. They have these similarities. But Bane has been like alone his entire life. He's been cold-hearted. Toto was not in these episodes, so I don't know what happened to Toto. Something maybe happened to Toto at some point along the line, because like Toto 360 is like the one closest companion Bane had, and even then I don't even think Bane really liked Toto. I think he just kind of tolerated him because he needed him for like tech stuff sometimes. I mean, he did blow him up at one point because he just kind of found him annoying and expendable. So yeah, I mean, if you want to see a bounty hunter run around just blowing people away left and right, then you've got Cad Bane. And Cad Bane's awesome. I love Cad Bane. But I wouldn't necessarily call Cad Bane a nuanced, well-developed character. He's a cool character, but I wouldn't call him necessarily well-developed, because he's also a villain. I mean, we're familiar with Cad Bane, and we know who he is because he appeared so much in Clone Wars. But did he really change at all? Did he grow or anything? He's a recurring villain, and they don't always need to change to fit the narrative, because they're just the villain. They're just someone to oppose our heroes and to stop. And so that's why I kind of feel like that maybe this is Bane's best appearance, because he actually stood for something this time around more than just another bad guy for the Jedi to face off against and a cool bounty hunter. He actually was, hey, this is what Boba could have been, and Boba was right for wanting to leave the bounty hunting life behind and actually find people to care about and become this, kind of benevolent leader of Tatooine. So I don't know. I just find that initial concept way more interesting. Even if the execution ended up being flawed, I find that way more interesting from a character standpoint and from a television, to watch this for 7 episodes standpoint, than if it was just 7 45-minute episodes of Boba Fett running around killing people. Because let's rewind a little bit to Mando Season 1. Mando Season 1 comes out, Grogu's introduced, everyone's kind of initially interested. It's like, oh, okay, this is, what are you gonna do with this? But then after like episode 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, or no, 4, 5, and 6, 4, 5, and 6 are all kind of standalone episodes. I mean, there's people have made jokes about it. They've made parody videos where it became very formulaic, where where Din, Grogu go to planet, they do side quest, they leave planet. Next episode, Din and Grogu show up on planet, they do side quest, they leave planet. And that repeated for like 3 or 4 episodes in a row until we finally got back to kind of the main plot. Because there was the sanctuary, the gunslinger, the prisoner, and then did it so it was 4, 5, 6. So then 7 and 8 were a 2-parter season finale. So like three episodes out of the 8 first season episode of Mando were very formulaic. And I remember during that time, I didn't do reviews on it at that time, but I can remember looking at all the comments online and stuff, people, and even some of the reviews going, it's like, yeah, this was enjoyable, but I don't feel like the story is progressing at all. It's just kind of samey where they go to a planet, they do a side quest, and then they leave. And imagine if that's what the Boba Fett show turned out to be. Where, all right, Boba goes to a planet, he does a side quest, he gets his money, and he leaves. And it's that for 7 episodes. And, there's maybe some banter between him and Fennec Shand. And that's kind of it. So, I mean, you complain about 3 episodes of the first season of Mandalorian kind of being a little side questy and not progressing the plot, even though they were. Because it's like, I remember at the time, like that episode, the prisoner, where they went to the prison barge and it had Bill Burr in it, and people. I mean, that episode ended. And most of the reviews that I read afterward totally wrote that off. Of this episode was a total waste of time. And, it's like it was enjoyable, but it had little to do with the main plot. Yeah, it was kind of a waste of time. I would have much preferred if we had discovered more about the child or Baby Yoda or whatever. And so it's just kind of weird that the show is so content with straying from the plot. And then fast forward to the second episode of season 2 where they're stuck with all the ice spiders. And people were going, yeah, it was an enjoyable episode. There were some scares from the ice spiders. But man, this just did not really progress the plot at all. It's like this was just really super kind of has nothing to do with the overall plot, and I don't like that. And then, well, would you look at that? Lo and behold, like 3 episodes later, as it turned out, the prisoner and the frog lady, I can't remember the name of her episode, sorry, with the ice spiders. I'm just going to call it the ice spiders episode. It's like, as it turned out, those are like 2 of the most influential episodes on the entire show, because it introduces us to Mayfeld, Bill Burr's character, and he ends up becoming important. And then but then that same episode also introduces us to these X-Wing pilots, who then become familiar with Mando's work, and then that's the whole instigating factor in the chase through the ice canyons. Anyway, is that they're like, hey, wasn't your ship kind of involved with a little kerfuffle with a New Republic prison barge? And then he was like, oops, time to go. And then when they rescue him, they're like, okay, well, we know you're a good guy because we know the security tape show that you tried to save that New Republic officer's life. So, you're a bounty hunter, and we don't particularly like that. But we're gonna let it slide this one time. And then that ended up, and then that pilot ended up coming back later on in the season. To report on the Imperial holdouts that were on Navarro after Mando and Grogu came back to deal with that, to help get the ship prepared as well. And then here's this guy again, and in Mando's big episode of the Book of Boba Fett, The Return of the Mandalorian. It's like, here's the same pilot again. So now, obviously, this is one of the things that was going to be leading to Rangers of the New Republic. We don't know if that's a show that's really happening anymore, thanks to the whole Gina Carano thing. I think I've seen things that it's been shelved indefinitely. But that's another one of those things. It's like, okay, how much information, quote unquote, about Star Wars that's on the internet do I necessarily believe? Because like Insider reports that. It's like, okay, insiders have reported a lot about Star Wars in the past, and almost none of it has turned out to be true. Very rarely does it turn out to be true. Ahsoka and Mando turned out to be true and being played by Rosario Dawson, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, fine. That one's true. But I mean, it's like there was the same, what's his name, Mike Zero or whatever. It's like he reported like every time that one of the sequel trilogy movies, like new leaked information of a scene from the movie where Luke Skywalker pulls a Star Destroyer out of the sky. And guess what never happened in the entire, and it's just all clickbait. So I don't necessarily know if I believe that it's like, I think I believe it a little more than I disbelieve it, because it's like, well, she was supposed to kind of be the star of that, and they fired her, so that'd be kind of awkward if to do it now. So obviously this New Republic pilot, the New Republic pilots that keep popping up, that was going to lead to Rangers of the New Republic. But obviously, but as I think it's clear at this point that it's all going somewhere. So just imagine though, if all the Boba Fett show was Monster of the Week, Bounty of the Week, running around just collecting bounties, and there wasn't really a through line story. I think people would have a hissy fit over it, because episodic shows like that are totally fine. It's like Batman the Animated Series. That's like one of the all-time greatest cartoons ever, and it doesn't really have a overarching plot, really. It's just like, all right, what villain are we going to go after this week? And it's great. It's fantastic. It does a whole lot of great character work, but it doesn't really have a whole lot of it's not because Clone Wars kind of was like a combination of both, where it was both an episodic Adventure of the Week show, but it also had this through line, because like once a season there would be an arc concerning certain characters, and maybe the arc would be a little different each season, but it's all right, here's our yearly check-in on these characters and their development and their growth. So you saw that with the clones, you saw that with Padme, you saw that with the Mandalorians. So like in season 1, you get rookies, you get like Bombad Jedi or something like that has Padme in a couple episodes. You get Hostage Crisis that introduces Cad Bane, and then season 2 we get the beginning of our Mandalore stuff, and that ended up having a lot of big repercussions throughout the rest of the show. And then season 4 of course has the Darkness and Umbara arc, and so at the time you're going through this, and it really does kind of feel like that this is a Adventure of the Week show, which again it kind of sort of is, but each of these Adventures of the Week, these 4-episode arcs, they're all building up to something. So when season 7 of Clone Wars arrived, and when it ended, and you realize that all of this previous buildup that they'd done in the prior 6 seasons really was them using the Adventure of the Week format to tell a serialized story, which is bonkers to think about, because it's like, wow, that's not really kind of how it's traditionally done. Because if you do a serialized story, then it's like Daredevil, for instance, on Netflix. It's like they do some different things episode to episode, but it's all in service of getting to the end goal of stopping Wilson Fisk or taking down the Punisher or what have you, or the Hand, etc. So Clone Wars just did that just a little bit differently, because it's like, yeah, we would have these yearly check-ins, but now it's like, okay, Jar Jar gets a couple episodes. So, all right, here's the story with the droids, that it's these 4 episodes in season 5, and doesn't really go anywhere. Doesn't really have too much to do with the overall story as a whole. I mean, it introduces Gregor, and that's kind of the lasting impact of that arc. But it's like, with the exception of Gregor, honestly, I feel like that arc also has like the one and only episode of Clone Wars you can skip, which is A Sunny Day in the Void. It's like, I don't like that episode at all. It's like, just skip that one on rewatches. Because it's like at the opening narration, the next episode is going to give you all the in 30 seconds. It's going to give you all the information you need, and it's going to save you 22 minutes of your life. You're going to get 22 minutes of your life back. But so it's like, yeah, you did have these early check-ins, but then it's like, all right, here's an arc about the droids, and that was fun. That was great. I loved that about Clone Wars, it being different like that, and so me being used to that. By the time Mandalorian came out, that's, I think, and now with Boba Fett as well, that's why I'm not necessarily one to jump to the, nothing happened this week. It's a big waste of time this week. That's why I don't really usually jump to that. I'm very trusting of the process, because starting Clone Wars in the 5th grade when it came out, and then watching it as it ends finally when I'm in college, and seeing and going back and looking at all the story arcs, and it's like, wow, this is one like big narrative web that they ended up weaving over years and years and years. So and there are definitely episodes of Clone Wars where you can look and even on some people's, like, there's so many episodes of Clone Wars, here's the ones that are important to watch list, and they leave off a lot of what I think are really important episodes. It's like, why would you leave this certain episode off? It's really important in the overall story. Just because it focuses on, Padme for an episode or something doesn't mean that it's redundant or doesn't need to be on there. It's like some of those Senate episodes with Padme are like some of the most important episodes of the entire show. So because of that, I'm a little more trusting of the overall process, and I'm not one that's just ready to shout filler. This is a filler episode. Total waste of time. And so now pacing is a whole nother thing. And yeah, with Din Djarin taking center stage for 2 whole episodes of Boba's show, that did kind of mess with the pacing. And like I said, the Book of Boba Fett was not perfect, but overall I did really, really enjoy it. There's a whole lot of other nitpicks I could go into, like the citizens of Mos Espa just totally being on board with Boba Fett being their leader. It was something that, and like being gracious towards him and showing that respect, and like it's like, oh, why does it always have to be the right arm, and giving him a Melu run and everything because they love their new crime boss or whatever. I don't know. I feel like that could have been developed a little bit better, because I don't know. Based on prior episodes, it kind of feels like that the people of Tatooine don't really care who's in charge, as long as there's not, violence in the streets. And Cad Bane made it pretty clear. It's like, well, as long as the spice runs, you'll all be left alone. So, I mean, maybe if Boba had stepped down and let the Pykes take control of Tatooine, everyone would have been fine. There wouldn't have been this giant battle in the middle of the streets. I think we as the audience definitely know that the Pykes are no good, and Boba is probably the better person to be in charge of Tatooine, even though it's Tatooine and it is this slime hole of a planet that's really, it's like, why does anyone bother living here at all? But I think for the show, they really needed to demonstrate why the Pykes were so bad. And because especially for like Star Wars nerds, like, I know why spice is bad, because it's like a whole bunch of earth drugs mixed into one thing. It has its medicinal uses, but when it's used as a drug, it's like, no. And Boba even says that, yeah, he says it, but again, this is one of the things about storytelling, is that you show, don't tell, and they told instead of showed, maybe because they ran out of time, because they spent 2 episodes on The Mandalorian instead of Boba Fett. Anyway, where he's like, spice kills people. So I agree, and so Fennec Shanty's like, well, I mean, if we control the trade, then that's going to be a large boon for us. And Boba's like, no, I'm not going to tolerate spice, okay, and because it kills people just as much as a blaster does, because people like overdose on spice or whatever. So I mean, and because he spent so much time with like Hutts and other gangsters and criminals that he knows the ins and outs of all this stuff. So I totally understand his point of view there, but a more casual Star Wars fan that doesn't necessarily know what spice is they're going to be maybe a little confused by that. So I kind of feel like that maybe they should have shown the Pikes, being like deliberately almost kind of like the Empire to a degree, where they show up and everyone's kind of like, well, I mean, they've got an army and you're just Boba Fett, so sorry, we're gonna because I mean, when the Hutts showed up, everyone's like, okay, the Hutts are in charge. Boba's not in charge. The Hutts are in charge because they're Hutts. So I feel like the people would probably be the same way with the Pikes. It's like they've got an army. You're just you, an assassin, and a Wookiee, and some teenagers. Essentially, it's like who are we going to bow down to? I'm going with the army with the Tommy gun blasters, which were cool. I was like, oh, they kind of look like Tommy guns. That's fun. But so I feel like we needed some scenes of the Pikes like really asserting their dominance on Mos Espa or something like that, and like doing it's like, all right, there's going to be a curfew or really cracking down on people, and then like and someone saying it's like, man, it's like the Empire all over again. And it's like didn't we just get rid of these guys 5 years ago? And because I mean they've in Mos Eisley they have the stormtrooper helmets on Pikes. No pun intended. no pun intended. That's funny. Because they have those stormtrooper helmets there. So obviously, the citizens of Tatooine don't like the Empire. Like most people in the galaxy probably didn't like the Empire. So it's like if the Pikes come in and start being very imperial about their being very tyrannical about their rule, then I mean maybe that's why they're okay with Boba Fett being the one in charge, because from the start he's very much open about the fact that he's like, oh, I'm just here to make sure the streets are clean, there's no violence, and blah blah blah. So that definitely could have been handled better. That's one of the things that I feel definitely could have been handled better, because by the end of the episode when he's walking the streets and everyone's showing him respect and thanking him and stuff, I'm like, isn't he the reason there was kind of a battle in this city to begin with? Because if he had just vacated, the Pikes would have just taken command and there wouldn't have been any bloodshed whatsoever. Instead, a Rancor smashed through buildings. These giant Old Republic-style droideka things were blasting things left and right. All these other shenanigans. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like maybe Boba Fett's the one at fault here for being stubborn and not giving up what he thought was his territory. And so yeah, and also, how did Bib Fortuna betray Boba Fett again? That's still not clear to me. So yeah, I mean, definitely not the best put together show. There's still a lot of and this is another reason why I want a second season. I want more of Boba Fett. I'm sure we're going to get more of him in the Mandalorian season 3 or whatever, or Ahsoka or whatever other live action projects are coming up. But I definitely want Boba to have the focus again, and to focus on Boba for a little bit more, because I just like him, and there's definitely a lot of things left, because I've seen some people go, it's like, okay, well, that's disappointing that this is Boba Fett's TV show and 2 episodes didn't focus on him at all, and there's no room for him left to grow as a character more, or for there to be any other conflict, or like there's so much other stuff that they could do with Boba Fett. So going into Tatooine. So, but I do find it funny that now suddenly people are like complaining about like Tatooine overload or something like that. It's like, I don't know, because now Kenobi is going to be coming out, and that takes place on Tatooine too. But it's like I think that's just kind of two TV shows back to back taking place primarily on Tatooine. That is a little funny. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just that these 2 stories, that it makes sense for them to be taking place on Tatooine, just happen to be coming out around the same time. I don't really think that's a big deal, but whatever. I've been going on for a long, long time. So yeah, good episode, good finale. I enjoyed it. It definitely is just the Mandalorian season 3 with a heavier focus of Boba Fett, and I think that's totally fine. I liked it. I'm looking forward to see whatever they do next. I'm obviously looking forward to Kenobi. Hopefully we get those animated Boba Fett episodes from Clone Wars finished. That'd be awesome. So yeah, that'll be it for Fett Fridays for now. Who knows? Maybe someday they'll come back, but for now, that's definitely the end. So, yeah, I guess I'll see you guys back here for more Star Wars reviews when Kenobi comes out in May. So definitely looking forward to that. That'll be good. So yeah, that'll be it for this review. Thank you for watching. Please, especially thank you for watching. This is the longest one of the season, but you know, a lot to talk about. It was the season finale and all that. Oh, by the way, Cad Bane probably not dead. Even if he is dead, he can totally show up at other points in the timeline because Star Wars is funny like that, where they just jump around the timeline all the time. So if Bane is dead, then this is still not the last we've seen of him. I'm pretty certain about that. So anyway, that'll be it for this review. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are in the description below, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.